Well, welcome to this event on Seven Insider with Joanne McArthur to discuss animal photojournalism. It's a pleasure to have you here, Joanne. Um, and you're a photojournalist. You're the founder of We Animals Media. You've produced 3 books, the most recent of which is this extraordinary volume, Hidden, on animals in the Anthropocene, which is a remarkable publication. We're going to discuss some elements of that. Tell us a little bit more about your background in photography, your background in photojournalism, and how you came to be focusing on the question of animals and animal rights.
Well, thank you for inviting me here. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. And I think it began because I just have this insatiable curiosity about the world, and the camera is a really good way to satisfy that curiosity. It's like an all access pass, in my view. Have camera, will travel. Have camera, have an excuse to, snoop around into the lives of others and get to know people and understand how things work and why we do the things we do. I've always been drawn to conflict photography and drawn to those who have done it. I was super obsessed with Magnum, for example, all their photographers and what they did. And Larry Towell, who's a Magnum photographer, became one of my mentors. And I was talking with him one day going on about how I wanted to go to Afghanistan. And he said, "Joe, that's not really you. What do you love most? What do you care most about in the world? And focus on that." And he had a point. And one of the things that concerns me most in the world are animals, non-human animals. And I had some thinking to do because, there's a lot of wildlife photography out there and companion animal photography. But what about all these hidden animals? I started thinking about them, those we eat. But maybe this is where I pull up some images to illustrate a little bit about
Yeah.
about who I've been photographing these last 2 decades.
Yeah, let's look at those images and talk us through those, both the ones that you've taken and the ones that are involved in We Animals Media. And you can talk about the organization as you go along too.
Okay. I've got about 24 images here. I think maybe I'll start with just the first 12 as illustrations of what I do and how I do it. So when Larry suggested I turn my mind to what I care most about in the world, it was all of these invisible animals. And I started working with NGOs because I, didn't know how to get into these industries, what to do, what it was like. So I called groups like Animal Equality, Djurrättsalliansen in Sweden, and said, "Hey, can I go along with you on investigations?" This is an image of what it's like doing an investigation. We often get up in biosuits and we go into factory farms. This is an example of what they look like and what it's like for us to investigate. People just don't know that we keep billions of animals every single moment of every day in conditions like these. And this work, this is the same farm. In fact, these are the kind of images I was taking. You can see she has this flat beak. That's debeaking. That's a common practice worldwide. So all these things that we don't know about, and I think we should know about. And that's what conflict photographers do. That's what photojournalists do, is expose things that we care about and things we want the world to know about, therefore affecting change, hopefully. Yes.
When do those images date from, and when did you start and transition into photographing animals as your primary concern?
We're coming on 20 years that I've been doing this. And, that was early career for me, and I wasn't taking very good images. I was at the beginning. So a lot of that work now I see, was practice work for the better images, which we see in my books and my presentations for sure. The images that I tend to present to the public are images from the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. If I can help it, the main images I'll show are from the last 5 years, because I like to show current work. This is an image from Luis Tato. He's one of our contributors to the book Hidden, which you've mentioned. When we animal photojournalists document animals, it's not a portrait. It's not a typical kind of portrait. It's very much about our relationship and the broken relationship between us and other animals. And so, you know, an image of this goose, for example, just on its own wouldn't cut it, but we want to show the domination. We want to see the caging and the constructs, the loss of autonomy, the suffering that these animals have. And this is just so important because we have created this hierarchy of animals, who's important, who's not, who's, you know, it's based on charisma. It's based on which animals we know best. It's based on which animals we use and we don't want to look at. So the animals we use, the domestic animals, are often at the very bottom. So let's hide them. And yet, as I said, they live in the billions worldwide, and we do all sorts of things to them. This cow is tethered by the back legs so that she can't move very quickly. All these things that we don't know about. And so animal photojournalists go out to show how they're transported, how they live, how they die. Another image of transport. Some animals have, domestic animals have dual use. They're not just raised for meat or their products, but for their skins, their fur, their wool. Later on, when we loop back to impact of images, I'll reference this image again because this is really important in animal photojournalism. We do want to have a short-term and long-term impact, and with individuals, but also with governments, with corporations. And so that's why often APJs, animal photojournalists, APJs for short, are working with NGOs and working with campaigners. People often think that my organization, We Animals Media, are campaigners. We certainly have opinions about animal rights, animal advocacy, but we're not campaigners ourselves. We work with campaigns, and we also make all of our work available for free to anyone helping animals. What you're seeing here is a fur farm. This is a mink farm, and the kits, which are baby mink, are curled around the body of their deceased mother. We're seeing these more unusual and difficult images more and more in the photo world and in media, which I'm really happy about. Even a decade ago, it was much harder to publish images like this. Images of, let's see, you know, this kind of thing. They would say, oh, well, you're an activist. This is activist work. This is subjective work. This is unimportant work. These are just animals. But all of that dialogue is changing, which I'm really happy about. This image was one of the highly commended images in Wildlife Photographer of the Year just a couple of years ago. What you're seeing is the Rattlesnake Roundup event in Texas. And it's a weekend-long event where hundreds of thousands of snakes are killed on display. You can behead the animal, you can skin them yourself, you can dip your hand in the blood and then do these, you know, handprints on the wall. You can see that by the handwriting that a lot of these people are children. It's absolutely fascinating how we normalize violence towards others. And yeah, so I've been to over 60 countries now to document our relationship with animals, our uses and abuses. Some of these animals who are hidden are actually on display, which I find fascinating. I've made a book about this called Captive, and it looks at our relationship with animals in zoos and aquaria. And this was in collaboration with the Born Free Foundation, speaking of, you know, NGO collaborations and how important those are to us. But yeah, some of these animals, interestingly, are on display, but we fail to see them. We're there for our own reasons. We're there for a day out. We're there for entertainment. Some people say that being able to interact with animals in this way while they're on display gets us to care about these animals. And I think that's a really interesting discussion. I would love to have data on how many people see an animal in a zoo and then go off to be an advocate for wild animals. I think that what happens when we put animals on display is that just further ingrains this idea that they are ours, that we are allowed to take them out of the wild, we are allowed to breed them, we're allowed to transfer them between zoos, we're allowed to sell them, we're allowed to kill them when they're considered surplus, and all of these things. I might stop there though. I have a few more images here of animals and entertainment, but we can maybe loop back into the images when we talk about hidden a little bit more. This is an
Yeah,
image
sure.
from Aitor Garmendia. He's an incredible animal photojournalist whose work has been in many competitions, many times. He's one of our hidden contributors. And I'll just maybe one more. This is an image I shot at a bullfight, and it's a great example of animals who are in plain view and in fact at the center of things, and yet we fail to really consider them as individuals. We know that these bulls suffer tremendously in this slow death that they experience, including having their ears cut off at the end if the matador has done a good job, and all this extreme violence, and yet we are ignoring extreme violence that's right in front of us because we say, well, this is culture, or this is about artistry of the matador, this is tradition. And I see it as my life's work to change the conversation, change the dialogue, introduce new ideas by introducing new images, new perspectives.
So you began as an individual, and this work became your focus. When did it become a collective? When did you form an organization? When did you get other contributors, and how did that process come about?
Well, I would say that I was just out in the field shooting too much with images ending up on my hard drive. And I'm so passionate about going out to do these things, which is fine and good. I was sometimes spending up to 8 months a year on the road, photographing animal stories, doing investigations. But ultimately, the reason I do this is because I want to create conversations. I want to reduce animal suffering globally, and that's not going to happen if my images are on a hard drive. And while I was thinking about that, I was getting more and more support from people who believed in the work I was doing. I've had great advice along the way, like, you should start a Patreon and get donations for this work so that you don't have to shoot weddings. Like, I've shot over 500 weddings in order to pay for this documentary work. I did food photography and all sorts of things, which was great. But I really did want to focus all of my time on the animal work. So my friend Anna said, let's start you a Patreon. And then instantly I had $3,000 or $4,000 a month coming in. I was like, great, okay, like I can cover some of my living expenses. I can do more of the animal work full time. And in other conversations with people, I would say, like I need to get these images out into the world, and how best to do that. People would email me every week, NGOs, activists, and say, hey, I saw that image online of a bull, and I'd go into my hard drive and I'd like email it or WeTransfer it, like totally laborious ridiculousness. And so we created an archive, online, free, keyworded, searchable by species or country, where people could just download the images. But we weren't tracking image use very, very well. So now we have built a world-class stock site, which gives us a lot of data. It's really user-friendly. We have almost 12,000 images there from 45 contributors. It's not just me anymore. It's me and 44 of us, which is really exciting. And we're tracking data. We're seeing what's used, what's not used. We're asking NGOs, what do they need? So we're looking very closely at the animal advocacy movement. We're looking very closely at what's going on in the world with climate change, disasters, hurricanes, pollution, and where there are important issues and conversations, we're doing our best to document those and to provide the media and to provide NGOs and advocates what they need for successful campaigns and strong conversations.
when you were, before you had an organization and before you had more of a collective and you were working individually, were you pitching stories to publications? Were you sending things to photo editors? And if so, what sort of response were you getting and what sort of success rate were you getting having your work used?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I started out with this work because I was just so in love with photography and the photo world. But then the more I worked with animal advocates and campaigners, I got into that world, and I sort of forgot about the photography world for a while, which is interesting because that's what I was doing. But I saw myself as a photographer contributing to animal rights, but I was ignoring the photo competitions. I was ignoring getting this work in front of influential people like photographers. And so we actually came back to that. I was off with an animal advocacy, and then we started the archive. I say we because, we had staff, because we had funding for staff. Then we built the stock agency. And at one point, I think it was last year, we're like, oh, I think we're a photo agency. Like we're kind of operating that way now. We have contributors, we have contracts, we give assignments. And did that answer your question? I think I went off on a tangent there a little bit.
Yeah, I was wondering if you had early reactions from photo editors to these kinds of stories.
Yes.
When you were just an individual before you had an organization.
Yeah, I was presenting so much as an animal activist during that time. And 10 years ago, it was also harder to publish these images anyway, broadly, for lots of reasons. But then, I don't know, we started getting taken more seriously when, take off the activist hat and put on like I'm a photographer just like all of you. I'm a photojournalist. I'm a conflict photographer just like all of you. And, I guess a confluence of things happened recently, which opened the door in the photography world to images like this. The photography world, I think it's inevitable. It was inevitable to acknowledge that like these animals are important, just as elephants are important, just as rhinos are important. Yeah, so it's an interesting time to be in animal photojournalism. We also coined that genre, and I was very worried, honestly, that there would be a lot of pushback from the photo world, and they would say, like, you can't coin a genre of photography. Like, who are you? You don't have the right to do that. Like, I don't know who does have the right to do that, but I thought, I do want to create an official space for this. Photojournalism is about the human condition. Animal photojournalism is about the condition of all living beings. It's different from conservation photography, and that includes all animals, the domestic animals, as we have seen for decades now in wildlife and conservation photography. It's literally called wildlife photography. Competitions in their rules and regulations stipulate you cannot submit images of animals in zoos or domestic animals. It's like, it's been driving me crazy because their stories are really important. And so my work has been excluded specifically from the photo world for a while now. So we wrote a short essay about animal photojournalism, that it's inclusive, that it overlaps with important issues of our day, climate change, deforestation, and human rights even. And we're really carving it out strategically with our language, with the creation of this photo agency, which looks specifically at animal stories. And things are changing, doors are opening, conversations are happening, like here today. So thank you so much for that.
I thought it was interesting when you observed earlier that when you were working individually, that you shot like 500 weddings, and that paid the bills while you were able then to do the work that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a point really worth underscoring. I think that's actually how certainly most people start, and probably the majority carry on as individuals, is that they fund the work they want to do indirectly.
Yes.
Historically, I think that's been the case in photography. I know that there are lots of people who are like, I want to be paid for the work I'm passionate about, but that's a challenge. So I think that's a point worth underscoring from how you began. But now you've transitioned to a place where you are able to support an organization and a group doing the work you want to do. Tell us a little bit about kind of the funding models and how you've achieved that. Particularly as I understand it, the images from the archive are available to use freely.
They are. Yeah, it's been a whole process. Do you want me to continue sharing the
Yeah,
screen? Yeah,
yeah,
just keep it as it is. Great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, luckily I like being an entrepreneur. I like the hustle of photography, figuring things out, how to make a living doing it, which is why I had success, in the earlier years of the wedding photography and then all that stuff. And then, but yeah, we had to figure out, okay, well, I want this work to be free, but I also want to get paid. Photographers need to get paid, and we need to stand by that. And so what model am I going to create? Well, people really appreciated the spirit of generosity with which we do everything at We Animals Media. Ultimately, this work is to further conversations about animals. Animals are my priority. So we want NGOs who often can't afford good images, strong images, or strong investigative work. We want them to have access to this stuff. But because people appreciate our spirit of generosity, they do donate. They may have $10 to offer. They may have $5,000 to offer. So our free archive does generate donations. In fact, it generates not only individual donations, but the NGOs who have a photo budget and can afford to support what we do, they do give generously because they do want to see this resource continue. We started applying for grants, private grants and public grants. Our main funder is the Open Philanthropy Project. They also saw that what we were providing for campaigners, media, etc., worldwide was very, very useful. Often campaigners have just sort of subpar images because they might have been shot with a hidden camera or someone who's not a professional photographer. And as we know, images go a long way in reaching people. And we saw that it was important for campaigners to have really, really strong images. Let's loop back to your question.
Well, just I think it's really interesting to explain, given that the images are given away freely, that you're able to support actually quite a large collective enterprise now. So
Yes.
there's not a choice between free and paid in this case, but you've got to a position where free can help paid. That's worth explaining a bit more.
Thank you for putting that into words. That's exactly what it is. Because grantors appreciate this model that we've built, they want to support it. And so we now have funding to support our operation costs, to support a NGO salary for myself and several others. We have 10 full and part-time staff now. And we have 45 photo contributors, as I mentioned. And the photographers who are, first of all, those who shot for hidden, we paid them for their images, which was exciting to be able to do. We want people to be able to get paid. And those who donated their work to our stock site, a lot of them are people with the same goals that we have, which is just get those images out there. And so if an NGO is downloading an image non-commercially, they get it for free. The photographer doesn't get a cut, but they have agreed to that. If it's a commercial use, then the photographer gets a cut from that. So we've just started this, and soon, like other agencies, photographers will be getting yearly checks. So it's something, and hopefully our revenues will increase. We sell prints. I get speaking fees. We have royalties from our books, so all of that generates some funding to keep this thing moving. It can be stressful at times. I had a vision for how we could strategically impact the conversation about animals globally, but I'm a photographer, and there's still, for me, a very strong drive to not be running an organization. It's to be out in the field, fulfilling that curiosity, which is what started me doing this work in the first place. But our team is amazing. Like, the reason we're being so strategic and getting ahead and making our mark and having that work used so very much is because we just have a kick-ass team. who have, who are wired very differently than I am. They're like, okay, every 2 years we have an annual general meeting, we map out our goals, and then we work backwards, theory of change. What do we need to do month by month? What do we need to build? What departments do we need to flush out in order to achieve our goals? It's a lot of fun. And the people in our team are super organized and super passionate. And I think that's why we're having this success right now.
You have 45 contributors to the archive, is that correct? How did they come on board? Did they find you? Did you find them? They obviously share the same kind of social purpose and sense of mission that you've got, I imagine.
Yeah, it's a good question, because two answers to that. I watch very closely what's going on globally with animal photographers and what they're doing. And when I find images that I like and photographers who are doing interesting work, I just grab those images, whether it's social media or a website, and I stick them in a file. And I had this growing file, this massive growing file of photographers who I wanted to talk with, work with, whose work I wanted to promote. And that was part of how our book Hidden was created. I wanted to create this memorable book of what is and what should never again be, and create a book because, as we know, books give work a certain weight and give the issues more longevity than they would otherwise have passing through social media. So it's part of my interest and part of my work is to look at what's going on in APJ globally. But also people were emailing and saying, hey, how can I work with you? So we put online a contributor form. Click here if you'd like to work with us. And we have lots of people filling out that form. We look at it every month. We reply to them. We evaluate their work. Do we need to say thank you and check out our masterclass and keep working on your APJ? Or do we want to say, oh my gosh, yes, get on board with us. Thanks for writing. And we've had all sorts of people. We've had New York Times and National Geographic photographers want to be contributors and who are now. We have people who are really new to photography and want to take part. So it's a whole system.
You mentioned masterclass there. Is education part of the kind of overall complex that you've got here, and what role does it play, and what sort of education are you interested in?
Yes, like Seven, we're very interested in mentoring. I've always done that because I've always had an inbox full of people saying, how do you do what you do? How do you investigate? How do you cope? The same questions all the time. And so we decided to build a masterclass on APJ, and there's 8 episodes. It's 2.5 hours, self-guided, and it answers those questions, and it follows me as I shoot it. It's an episode on editing, an episode on coping. And, I was a little worried that this would not be not have the interest that I was hoping for, but it does. To date, I think over 400 people have bought the masterclass, and I'm really happy with that because APJ is such a niche thing. I didn't know if we'd have 20 people buying it. I'm glad there's 400 because we put an awful lot of work into making it beautiful and well thought out, well constructed. So that has taken the pressure off of me in terms of my day-to-day answering emails, answering questions. I can point people towards the masterclass. We'll be launching portfolio reviews next year to help further people's work. And we're also launching our first Animals Media Fellowship. So this is a paid fellowship. It's about $6,500 Canadian, and that helps further or complete an animal photojournalism project. So the applications for that open on the 18th. Lots of exciting things there with learning and education. And I also offer humane education programs. So I'm in schools speaking with a lot of young people, talking about animal sentience and photography, and getting people excited about caring about animals.
Do you think have you seen changes over the years in kind of the way people are shooting these images and stories in relationship to animal photojournalism? Would you identify particular styles or particular topics or the ways those might have transformed?
I think the short answer to that is yes, I'm seeing a lot of change because APJ now does have a form. It has sort of a style. And as I said before, like what we used to see in animal advocacy work was just not very strong work. NGOs identified that they really needed professional good work to further their campaigns. And now that it has a form, I'm seeing people on their websites and Instagrams call themselves an animal photojournalist, which really pleases me. We definitely see common threads throughout the work. It's looking heavily at factory farming. And so you're seeing investigative work often that takes place undercover, takes place at night. I'm sure we'll get to that too. People are always very curious about how exactly I get images like this. Industries do not welcome people like me who want to show the conditions in which we keep animals, in which they live and die, which is why we now have ag-gag laws, which are agricultural gags, which make it very dangerous, even more dangerous for people like me to go onto farms. Whistleblowers can now be charged for whistleblowing, exorbitant fines, jail time. Here in Ontario, you can't even go close to a truck carrying animals now. You certainly can't photograph from the road inside of them. You can give huge fines for that. Yeah.
And this is law that has been obviously brought about as a result of agricultural interests, farmers' lobbies and the like requesting it.
Exactly. And we're seeing these laws eventually seen as unconstitutional and overturned, but it's an absolute waste of resources. Drives me bonkers. I also understand that I'm one of the people and other activists who have, who are the reason that there are ag-gag laws, because we go onto farms. It scares industry. It scares people. I wish I could, when I'm sneaking around at night, getting into these places, I really don't like it. In fact, I absolutely hate it. It terrifies me as well. I'm not there oh yeah, I'm coming in to, terrorize you. And I'm going in there with absolute fear for my personal safety, because I haven't been jailed yet, but most of my investigator friends have. And some of them have been beaten up, with baseball bats even. So I go in there very afraid, but very determined as well to use that small amount of time that I have in a place. It could be 10 minutes, it could be 5 hours, but I have to work under this idea that I might have just a few minutes to do a very good job in a short amount of time. So we go in, I don't break and enter, I go through open doors, I climb fences and go through open doors and document things as they are. It's also important to go in unannounced this way, because if you get an invite, you might get shown 1/20th of the space that has been cleaned up. The animals have been given bedding, bodies have been removed from cages, whether it's a pig or a mink, as you see here. So if you go in unannounced, you're showing things as they really are. And it's quite shocking how long bodies are left in cages before they're removed. Infections from vaccine areas on pigs and, all sorts of things. And that's what we need to know.
So we have a couple of questions that we're asking about how you work around those laws. I mean, you in part answered that. It seems to be that you work around them on the one hand by being covert, but on the other hand, you have this limit that you won't break and enter. So there's another sort of legal limit there, as it were. So there's a covert space, as it were, that you operate in. Would that be correct?
Yeah, but I can't speak for all APJs. We all have our limits of what we will do and not do, and perhaps some of them do a more formal breaking and entering. I prefer not to, just to mitigate some of the risks and retribution and consequences. Ag-gag laws do slow me down for sure. I would rather work where there are no ag-gag laws, but I also work globally all the time. So trust me, there's plenty of places that I can go to. And if I am working in an ag-gag province or state, I will just be exceptionally careful. But honestly, I I always am exceptionally careful. If anything seems amiss, I just won't go in and take the risk, and we'll do it another night. And it's not me doing all this reconnaissance. It's the investigators that I work with. So I'm really, really grateful for them. I wouldn't be able to do this much work if I wasn't working with activists and NGOs who have checked out a place and looked at where we can enter. It's never just me going in with a camera alone. We have people outside. We all have walkie-talkies in our ears. We check in every 10 minutes. Is everything okay? We have an exit strategy. We have a getaway car, like in a Bond movie. I'm kidding. Making light of something that's actually very, very serious. But yeah.
But that is an important point, because again, it's a collective enterprise. You're not going in as an individual. You've got backup, and you've thought about it, you've organized it, you've planned it, and so on, because it is high risk.
It is high risk. I'll skip ahead to an image that I shot a few years ago. Oh, some examples of what it's like, and then I'll get to this image. Yeah, people often wonder, what does it look like to go into these places and do this work? So this is me at the Turkish-Bulgarian border, documenting animals being transported in extremes of heat, which is illegal but happens anyway. Some of my investigators. Yeah, sure.
This is your investigator, is it? So this is someone working with you, because one of the questions from Ted is about privacy issues, about showing people working perhaps in these locations and so on, whether it's possible. What happens if you capture an image with a worker in these locations? Are you able to show that image? Can it be used, etc.?
That's a great question. For me, it's very much, it's not about the individuals or outing an individual. And in fact, we get a ridiculous amount of vitriol towards workers. It drives us absolutely nuts, and racist comments as well when we show workers. It's not about the workers. The workers, for the most part, don't want to be there. They would prefer other jobs. It's about exposing industries and practices. As much as I can, I get permission. I don't go around with consent forms, as you know, as photojournalists. It just doesn't make sense. I do when I can. With the investigators, like in this picture, if they don't want to be shown, if they want to remain concealed, that's how I operate. I may get an image of their face, but I'll either crop it out or not use the image. Such was the case with these investigators. So we don't see who that is. An image of me in the field. Oh, let me just actually get ahead to that image. Here we go. Images of workers and information about access. So I talked about how I go in at night by and large, but often as well, I rock up to a place unannounced and say, I'm a photojournalist. People don't know where their food comes from. People don't even know, there's so much they don't know. We interact with our food as ribs and not as a pig. It's cellophane wrapped. We can't even tell what body part it is. We call it veal when in fact it's a calf, and all of this. So I've been invited into plenty of slaughterhouses. I've also been turned away from many slaughterhouses, but when you go and you say, hey, I really want to document this, I've been invited in. This was in Thailand, and the owner of the slaughterhouse said, yeah, it's very violent what happens here, and people don't know. I had a group of veterinary students here last week, and some of them vomited from witnessing meat production. And he said, yeah, you can stay. I actually went back twice, and he allowed me to document the processes. He said, unfortunately, I couldn't speak with the workers. We didn't have common language. They were Vietnamese, Filipino, Cambodian. But, it was very strange for them to have this white woman with a bunch of cameras. That never happens. Getting in, and there I was on my knees in front of this violence, wanting to not tell a story these individuals as bad, because they're not. It's about practices that we don't know about. Yeah, and it's different from country to country. Sometimes it's electrical stunning. Sometimes it's electrical stunning in water, in a bath. Sometimes it's clubbing like this, and sometimes there's no stunning at all. It's just directly to the knife to the throat. Stunning practices also don't usually work. They work some of the time, not all of the time. So it just further further traumatizes the animal before they're killed. Like with clubbing a pig, it often doesn't knock them out, it knocks them down. And that's what you're seeing here.
Yeah. Maybe take us through some of these images from Hidden and talk a little bit about the book itself, how it came about, and
Yeah.
what you see as the purpose of the book.
Thank you. So I'll just scoot back here to that main page. Hidden was inspired by conflict photographers and the books that they would make that memorialized what they were seeing. And it was James Noctway's book Inferno specifically, who like when I saw that book, I knew that I wanted to do this for animals, and I knew that there was more work out there in the world that I could ever possibly do, and that other APJs were doing it. Hence that file I mentioned earlier, where I was squirreling away images that were really strong that I had seen over the years. And I knew that I was going to invite a lot of photographers to contribute to this. And this is the inside page. We have, this is an image by Britta Yashinsky. My co-author is Keith Wilson, incredible human, incredible editor, just loved working with him. He's created several books, and foreword by Joaquin Phoenix, who is an animal advocate and actor. Sorry for this graphic image. I guess so funny that my tendency is to say sorry, and yet that's what I do. I show graphic images to the world, but it's painful for me even now to look at this. So this image, the reason I'm showing you this image is because I spent the night at this wet market in Taiwan, and I had packed up my gear at this point, and we were leaving, and just as we were exiting, I saw this, took out my cameras again with my videographer, Kelly Guerin, and we filmed this process of cutting the shells off of the backs of these living animals. And you can see the turtle flailing, and this was just happening over and over and over. And as we photographers do, we got close and we stayed steady and got all sorts of images of this practice. And I got back to my hotel, it was 5 a.m. or so, heavily traumatized by the amount of suffering I had seen in this wet market all night, and especially by these turtles. And that book inspired by Inferno had been on the back of my mind. One of the ways that I cope with seeing all of this violence is taking action. And I was heavily traumatized that night. And so I just wanted to think big about what I could do. I wanted to think beyond like what I could do with that night's images and get them out on social media and whatnot. I was like, no, like there's so much work that needs to be done. And so I didn't go to bed. I mapped out the entirety of this book. And the working title was Animals in the Anthropocene. And I mapped out a timeline and the dream people that I wanted to work with, which was Keith and David Griffin, who designed the book. And the work began. And the work began of reaching out to photographers, looking at existing work, getting them to submit more work. And Keith and I went through thousands upon thousands of images, narrowing it down to the 208 images that we landed on for a strong narrative.
So it was this image which actually led to the book, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. And when you were editing the book, and so you end up with 208 images, I mean, let's explore the question of the use of graphic images a bit more, because this is, I think, one of the important parallels here between conflict photography and animal photojournalism. Is, what's the place of an exceptionally graphic image? On the one hand, you have to have them to record what's taking place because it is so graphic, that's unavoidably graphic. But then it's difficult to use sometimes in relationship to the audience, either in an exhibition or a book or whatever. How did you think that through in the editing of the book? How did you address this question of which and how many graphic images to use?
Well, that's one of the good things about creating your own book, is that you get to call the shots. You don't have to rely on the NGO use. You don't have to rely on media saying yay or nay, or someone exhibiting your work and curating. So we were the curators, and we know that there's very little place in the world for images of violence, be it towards animals or we human animals. Difficult stuff to publish. We know that you have to do a certain amount of hand holding when you publish graphic images, either online or wherever. I used to, when I started out in this work, I thought that people would be affected by graphic images the way I was. Part of how I learned about animal issues and eventually stopped eating animals and becoming an activist was I saw graphic images. They stopped me in my tracks, and I decided I wanted to use that suffering that I was experiencing in relation to their suffering to be in service and to others, and to change my patterns of consumption and all this stuff. But that's not how the world works. Like, just because I work that way doesn't mean others work that way. And so it was like a more work than I thought. I thought, oh, I shouldn't have to explain things. I shouldn't have to smile while I'm showing you these images of violence and tell you it's okay. And like, no. I've totally come around from that. And in fact, I really empathize with people who are facing the graphic images that I show. Is traumatic. And so I want to do as much hand holding as possible. And while I can't personally do that every time, I can give context. I can story tell. I can show the good and the bad. I can help people with the what's next. So we do that in We Animals Media. We do share lots of stories of change and progress. We look at pioneering efforts in animal advocacy, be they about law or running a sanctuary or neuroscience, and showing the positive. But
I thought it was interesting that you said that actually there's, if I heard correctly, there's like pushback from the media and maybe even NGOs about the use of graphic images. So you think that there's not an appetite in the media and not an appetite in NGOs for graphic images?
Well, people are afraid of turning off their audiences. We all are. And that's a very real thing that happens all of the time. There's a thin line, a fine line. For me, the best images are those that are beautiful and poignant and make a point about animal use, but aren't bloody and graphic. Perhaps like the one we have here, in fact. These are birds have just been unloaded from a truck. You can see one living bird hanging there who's first in line for slaughter. So this gives you a sense of what the starting process is like at a slaughterhouse. It's a beautiful image. It draws you in. It is also repulsive, but it is also beautiful. If the image went too far over into graphic, you're much more likely to just have them turn the page or swipe away from the image. I enjoy thinking about that fine line. I enjoy thinking about a narrative, be it in a photo essay or in a single image, that will engage people and stop them from turning away. I mean, that is our whole raison d'être, is to get people to look and to not turn away. So I'm certainly not, I'm certainly going to be giving that a lot of thought.
Balanced with the need, well, not balanced, because I don't think balance is the right idea here, but joined with the need to also occasionally show graphic images, which, because that is what is happening.
That is what is happening. That is the reality. And with Hidden, we wanted a tome of a book, something unflinching that did look at the violence, looking at the state of affairs, which is why it's called Animals in the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is the proposed name for the current geologic era, signifying basically total human planetary domination.
Yeah, thinking about human planetary domination. We've got a question from Angela wondering if, because you're talking about the, structures and kind of complex organizations here, there are obviously theories of power involved and structural relations of power and so on. She wants to know if feminist theories about hierarchical power relations between humans and animals, etc., either have influenced you or you think about those. Have they impacted on your activism and work at all?
Definitely thinking about power structures in general. We're looking at speciesism here, first and foremost. We are looking at the powers that corporations and governments have. We're looking at economies that want to produce as much cheap meat as possible and keep that very fact of the production of cheap meat hidden from us so that we continue to consume it. Yeah, there are all sorts of levels here involved. Also, this is humanitarian work for me as well. The people who are going to inevitably be in these images, which are factory workers and slaughterhouse workers, as I said earlier, they are vilified, but that's not in fact what should be happening at all. People are often working in these industries if they, are suffering from poverty, can't get other work, they're refugees, they're unpapered. And so I would love for factory farms and slaughterhouses to not exist also for the people involved in them. Yeah.
We had an earlier question that touches on that. It's interesting that you say humanitarian work because I think it was Liberia, if I pronounced that correctly, was wondering how the work of animal photojournalists touch on human rights issues. And it seems that maybe where you talked about it as kind of a humanitarian dimension here, there are human rights issues in terms of who's working in this agricultural complex.
Yep. Yes, there are. And I would love for We Animals to address that even more. That is our plan. We're very interested in talking more with factory workers. There's a fantastic book by Gail Eisen. It's called Slaughterhouse, and it's a study, an investigation into who these people are, what it's like for them, the short and long-term effects on their mental health, the health of their families, the incidence of violence towards family members, domestic abuse. It's higher in with people who work at slaughterhouses, which is interesting. I have a lot of compassion for the people who work there, and I'd like to continue to, broaden our look at that.
Should we talk a little bit more about the question of impact directly? Because We Animals Media is a purpose-driven organization. You described it earlier as an agency, but it's also more than an agency, I think, as well. Perhaps you want to elaborate on that a little bit. What sort of impact are you trying to have?
I'll shout out the team again. So grateful for their guidance and how mission-oriented the We Animals Media team is. I want to have a lot of impact, but they make it happen. They give us a structure. So we have our annual general retreats. We look at our goals, we look at the impact we want to have, and then we map it out. So everything is mapped out week per week, month per month. Of course, there's a leaf blower going now. Isn't that the case with Zoom calls? Like there's always going to be a lawnmower. I hope it's not too distracting.
I think we're okay. It's just another human nature interaction taking place anyway, an unnatural one at that.
The leaf blower. Oh my gosh, it kills me.
Yeah.
And so we map things out very strategically. We look at what is underreported. Can we go there? There's not enough reporting on fish and fish sentience and fish farming practices. And so we have some really huge stories coming out on that. We look at where we'd like to see more good and strong work coming out for campaigns in places where we're not seeing a lot of that, like South America, We're very interested in what's going on in Asia, collaborating with Asian organizations. So we look at geography, we look at the needs of NGOs, we look at their changing needs. So are they focusing on fish? Are they focusing on broiler chickens? What's of interest to them? We approach them, introduce ourselves, let them know that they can use our work. We make friends with them, and we've done that over the years with lots and lots of NGOs. We collaborate with them on stories and assignments. One example is one of my favorite groups. They're called EAST, the Environment and Animal Society of Taiwan. They're very effective. They take the work that they have and they go straight to government. And they have really good public campaigns as well. And I was very interested in working with them. And we did. So I was in Taiwan for 2 or 3 weeks, and we documented a lot of different industries. And they took that work and very carefully crafted campaigns about layer hens or about fish binding or wet markets. And we've seen like my favorite kind of collaboration, which is We Animals Media, a strong NGO, and media partners as well. So in that case, we paired up with The Guardian, and they ran a few of those stories. And so we are seeing international coverage, we are seeing policy change, national conversations, and that's what we want to do most of, which is great. I'm not out shooting 6 months a year with the work ending up on the hard drive. I'm shooting way less, but with much more impact.
Mhm.
And we track impact as much as we can through who's using our stock site. We stay in close contact with the NGOs. We want to know their numbers. How many people did they reach? What has changed? What welfare laws have changed? What enforcement has happened? Yeah, lots going on there, lots to manage, but we love it. I mean, we want proof. We want to know that we're doing a good job. If we're not, we're going to change tack. We're going to do different projects. We're going to work with different NGOs. If we're doing something good, we're going to, follow that strategy and do more of the same thing.
So, I mean, there are lots of metrics associated with or what people think of as impact in terms of reaching an account with a certain number of followers or certain number of emails being opened or whatever. But you also talked about changing the conversation and ultimately altering policy. Are they the ultimate impact goals? Those two things, conversation and policy?
Yeah, and those are two very different things. I can't say that the tactic is very different. Like, we know through socials and through word of mouth and campaigns, there's going to be an ongoing trickle of influencing individuals. And we know that that's happening because we have great response in terms of, socials, emails we get saying, I didn't know about this practice. I no longer eat pigs, or I've become vegan, or I've given up this. So we have the day-to-day input. We have our socials metrics. We have donors. So we have all sorts of donors from $5 a month to more, people who have been affected by our work on a personal level. And that's really important. We want that. We want to, be part of the conversation and create conversations. But we also want to reach really high levels. We want this to start conversations in government, policymakers. We want lawyers' eyes on this. We want to influence more and more animal law. And we can only do so much of that legwork on our own, which is why it's so important for us to partner with campaigners, because they're the ones who are working on higher levels and influencing policy. So, it's really fun. It's a really fun puzzle to put together and to see who we want to work with and where we want to put our efforts. And it's a constant conversation with us, like a weekly conversation in We Animals Media. Who do we want to talk with next? Who do we want to form a partnership with?
But it seems like the main kind of modus operandi for achieving impact is to collaborate with others. Would that be correct?
100%. That is the first line in our We Animals Media website achievement page. We have a list of achievements and real world changes that we've affected. And the first line is, we achieve nothing alone.
Yeah. Social change is a long and complex process, and it involves lots of
Ugh,
actors working together. And you don't know whether you're going to get to that goal in the end, but you're moving towards it, hopefully.
one step at a time. I think
Yeah.
if I was looking long term all the time, and my wish is for global animal liberation, of course, but like if that was where my focus was, I would be disorganized and depressed, because change, as you said, happens incrementally and painfully slow, because I'm so aware as a frontliner just how bad the suffering is every moment of every day. So I choose to focus on what we can do daily, being strategic. Thank you to my team for keeping us so organized, and being happy with that. Conflict photographers suffer from PTSD, as we
Mhm.
know, and we burn out because this field work and the suffering is incredibly painful and depressing. And so, how to mitigate that is for me to focus on short-term achievable goals.
So as always, I've been bringing in some of the questions from Q&A. So if anyone else in the audience wants to pose a question, please do so in the Q&A. We've still got time for a couple more. There's kind of a question and a comment from Ellie, and that's about increasing attention on alternative food in place of so plant-based food largely, as opposed to animal-based food. Is that something that you're paying attention to as part of the overall issue? Are you doing stories on that? Are contributors doing stories on that?
I don't know who asked the question, but it's so funny that you're asking, because we love stories of change and progress, and we haven't been doing enough of them. We have our Unbound project, which looks at the work of women animal advocates globally. We've been doing this for 6 years. We love that project. But starting next week, I am photographing 5 companies who are leaders in plant-based alternatives and cultivated meat. So I fly to California in a week, and I'll be there shooting like these pioneering efforts and the plants that they're working in. Some of these places look like breweries, like with the fermentation that's happening. And as we know, companies like Beyond and Impossible and Tofurkey, like Miyoko's cheese, like these products that they're making are becoming normalized, thank goodness, and they're really delicious. And we need people eating more of them and eating fewer animals so that we can, change the amount of suffering happening in this world. So I'm going to do a story. We have a media partner. It's very exciting. We can talk about that later. But I also have to keep in mind that a lot of people can do these stories. Like, it doesn't have to be We Animals Media doing stories on plant-based. A lot of photographers can do that. We do have to keep our main focus on the things that we are specialized at, like the investigative work. A lot of photographers can go into a place legally and take nice pictures, but so few of us are going into factory farms to continue to expose abuses, industrial changes. For example, hen farms, you used to have like, rows of hens in cages laying eggs, but now these are like, as you saw in that first image, like these are towering places. Do you know, for example, they have hog hotels, that's what they call them in China now. And so they're
Good to
scaling
know.
up the pig industry vertically. We have pig factory farms now that are 12 stories high. Not a lot of people are going to shoot that. And this comes back
Mhm.
to conflict
Mhm.
photography. There's so few of us out in the field photographing these harder issues. So we will
Mhm.
continue to keep our focus on that work
Yeah.
while supporting
Just
change and progress.
yeah. Just we had a question earlier about are there any thinking about how to work on these investigative stories? Do you have resources that can guide people on how to work and do these stories? Perhaps this is covered in the masterclass. Perhaps there are other resources, I don't know. But are there resources available for people who are interested in getting into this work, but obviously doing it safely and properly?
Yeah, safety is paramount, especially if you want to be able to continue doing this work and not burn out and not get injured. So this masterclass that we've produced, I don't know that there's any like it specific to animal photojournalism. So that's definitely a go-to. It's on our website, We Animals Media. And because I don't have the bandwidth anymore to mentor people personally, we're going to, as I said, offer portfolio reviews. So come and show us your work. And while we're doing a portfolio review, we can talk about what the challenges are, what the constraints are. Something about me, though, is that I can't, like, it's almost illegal for me to advise on trespassing and doing these more covert things. So I can talk about how I do it, but I can't give advice. Like, I could get in a lot of trouble for saying, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. Yeah.
We did also have a question earlier about, do you have a legal team at the nonprofit giving all these issues? I mean, you must encounter legal hurdles and challenges pretty regularly.
So on the ground level, before I go into a farm, I'm with a team and they have a lawyer, often pro bono, thank you, who we can call if we get in trouble. And because when you get detained, you get all your stuff taken away from you. What we do is we write the number, the phone number of the lawyer on our arms, so that we can't lose that. It's a very important thing to do when you're investigating. And it's also very important to tell people where you're going and that you will check in at a certain time. And if they don't hear from you, that perhaps there's something to be worried about. And then on a bigger scale, bird's eye view, we do work with an incredible group called Animal Defense Partnership. And this is a group of lawyers who advise us on all things contractual and legal, and they're a dream to work with. And they also offer their services pro bono.
Another example of how you have to collaborate with others in these sorts of projects. You could not do these things alone without those sorts of additional services and support.
Can't tell you how grateful I am to be surrounded by so much help and so many people and groups who are interested in furthering this really important issue.
Yeah. So we're coming towards the end of our time, Joanne. It's been fantastic. We've covered a lot of issues. Just two final questions that have come in. Can you say any more about the portfolio reviews, where they might be and when are they taking place?
Thank you. We're really excited to get those going, but that will be next year sometime. What we're launching first is the fellowship. Let me pull up that slide. I have it here. The applications open on October 18th, and this is funding for a project, and we will mentor that fellow along the way and help with all things access, promotion, editing. We really look forward to doing that. Hopefully, we will get more funding for the fellowship, so we'll be able to offer 2 a year instead of 1. And the portfolio reviews, once we get organized for that, I'm thinking like after, as of Q3 of next year. I don't know how many we'll be able to do at a time. We're in the process of mapping that out. I love editing. Oh my gosh, I love looking at images and talking about images and improving images. And, critiques are so fundamental to improving as any kind of photographer. As we know, they can be really painful. I've had edits where I just felt like, I've wanted to die afterwards because it was so grueling. But like, those are fundamentally what have improved my work immensely. So I do encourage people to keep an eye out for that on our website. Yeah.
And final practical question is, if someone wants to become a contributor, who do they get in touch with at We Animals Media, and how do they get in touch with them?
Thanks for the question. Our website's there, weanimalsmedia.org, and you can click on Work With Us, which is actually on this screen as well. That's a drop down, and you can click on Volunteer, or you can click on Become Part of Our Team. And there's a contributor form. Let us know who you are, where you work, what your interests are, whether you have images that you want to have on our stock site, or whether you're interested in assignments or both. It's all there.
Fantastic. All right, I think that brings us to the end of our time, Joanne. It's been absolutely fantastic. There are so many issues to think about in terms of approaches to photography and storytelling, but I think what you have created is quite extraordinary, and there are lots of lessons for people to draw from that for doing work with a social purpose and how to achieve it collaboratively in particular. So thank you very much for that presentation. Thanks for your time. And thank you to everyone in the audience for participating in the questions.
As well. Thank you, David. Thanks for everyone who joined. And if you have any questions for me, just write to info@weanimals.org and we'll get to you. So thanks very much.
Great. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.